any of it. It would be nice to have, but you know, we don't really need it. This is the largely the poetry of a southern region of the Indian continent of South Asia. It's an indigenous product of that relatively, at the time, isolated culture. It is also significantly well, not just before, but pre-Hindu in its undercurrents. The Hindu culture was largely based in the north for quite some time, but these little pockets of culture down south were able to flourish in their own right. There are two distinct genres that we're dealing with here. One is akam, meaning interior. One is param, meaning exterior. We've spoken about different versions of art that appeals to these two things before. Something that is interior is having to do generally with your heart and your soul and your emotions and your personal, sensibilities and everything that's, going on with you. And the exterior is more public. It is a poetry of what is broadly cultural, what everybody has a share in. So it is less intimate, but can often take on some broader themes and gives you a little bit more of a perspective on social conditions of the time. Not a lot, because the Akam poetry is surprisingly revelatory and expressive just in its miniature form. And when you start to really dig through the details, you can get an awful lot out of it that expand way beyond the simple human dramas that it's often trying to depict. The Akam poems are generally a progression of cultural signifiers. Presumably, most of them are covering what are, within this framework, 5 stages of love. The first being a lover's union. Scenes of this, poems from this, are generally taking place at night when lovers unite, and also very often in hillsides. You'll see them wandering around in the hillside. Number 2 is a time of separation, when you have the lovers torn apart after an initial infatuation. Wondering about one another is a time of some uncertainty, some pain. This is generally taking place in around dusk and at a seashore. And if you think of those two conditions, those two settings, well, dusk, sunset, is the time that you see a clear separation between night and day. And a seashore is a clear separation between land and sea. And the separation itself is itself a way of joining together, but still highlighting the division between them. They are close and yet different. They are far apart and yet somehow conjoined. It's a little paradoxical, but it is all helping underscore the meaning of the poetry, and the poetry is very, very disciplined in using these signifiers. There's also number 3, a period of hardship. This is often wasteland imagery, Desert imagery. It is taking place under a hot sun. And if you think of equatorial India, it gets pretty warm there. So the idea of a hot, hot, oppressive sun bearing down on everything, drying everything out. This is a time of great hardship. Makes me think automatically, quite frankly, of the prominence of the sun in Himta'atan, but also in that section you'll see themes that are going to lead straight to, not necessarily literally to, but straight to T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. Stage 4 is Marital Happiness. This takes place in the evening. Things get a little romantic. Usually on a forest edge. The forest is always very lush, perhaps even bursting with life, overgrown. It's sexy stuff, but it's also an edge. It is the division between the wild forest and perhaps the settled plain. So you see again the setting of the setting of the poem carrying an awful lot of meaning before you even read word 1. And then following Marital Happiness, and you can argue about this all you want in terms of the inevitability, but there is a period of hardship in the marriage, usually brought in through a fear of or reality of infidelity. This tends to take place in low-lying areas, farmlands, but you can see the contrast between 5 and 1. If marital infidelity, that betrayal of trust, is taking place on a low-lying area, that is in obvious contrast to the hilly, high area of their first love. So you see this little matrix getting developed where meaning is being created in a very formal but suggestive way. Not all the same tropes that we in the West might expect, but they are familiar in their own little ways. And once you accept that they're going to have certain understandings, we're told at the beginning of each one of these lyrics as they're printed where they are and what's going on. That frames everything that follows. And I think it's instructive to bear that in mind as we go through. You don't have to follow it too rigidly. It always helps to take a step back and think, well, what else could this mean? But especially if you're coming to this work for the first time, it can help sort of put a little guardrails on, oh, okay, this is what this means. The seashore, it's a day at the beach. It should be fine. But no, they're all sad. What's with that? This can help you not go down a lot of blind alleys. Anyway, in this selection, we get this nice little progression, as I spoke about, essentially a story of a love affair. The characters are all unnamed. That is, that has certain effects, and you can speculate on what they are all you want. I would say the most immediate one is, well, we don't know who they are, so who could they be? Anyone. Absolutely anyone. Again, a little perhaps obvious or incidental quirk of the poetry. Characters don't have names, but that suggests something. There's meaning to be drilled down into there. We don't know who these people are, so they become universal, so we can all get a piece of it. It's no longer just, you know, Susie and Johnny that we know down the street. Oh, them, yeah, they got a problem. They had quite the story, but, you know, that's not me. What do I care? Well, no. If it can be anyone, it can be you. And as you get into the experiences that they're going on, the emotions that are being expressed, you can start to see that, oh, yeah, that seems a little familiar. I've been there, let's say. Another interesting characteristic going through here is that the central drama tends to be 3 characters: the boy, the girl, and the girlfriend. It's your basic rom-com. The girlfriend is, by different interpretations, either a friend, meaning, you know, just a social equal, or to some it would mean a servant, somebody who is there expressly for the purpose of helping the primary girl. And that can color your interpretation of this. Well, you know, sure, they're just friends. Well, are they really? Because the servant girlfriend doesn't seem to have an independent life beyond the primary figure. So what is that relationship, and what can it tell us about that? And is that really coloring how that character, let's say, is presenting herself, or presenting the wishes of either of the other characters to its opposite? All of these things matter. All of these things can give you hints at, well, what the hell is really going on here? Because it is not easy to figure out. Each of these poems is essentially in a different voice. We're told, you know, what she said to her girlfriend. We're given a little set dressing at the very beginning, and that organizes everything that follows. You can scrape that off and say, well, I just want to deal with the poetry itself. It's like, okay. But these little hints are there for a reason, and they help color your interpretation of it for good or for bad. The other issue I would say that is significant in here is that you are getting an awful lot of she said and she said to her friends in these directions, which is a interesting development for a traditional culture in this time of human history. You're getting a really intimate peek at what women think, how they act with their friends. You know, we're hearing women's voices, which are not particularly common material for literature of the 3rd century of the Common Era. So that grants them a kind of validity that you just don't find in many other sources. Yes, they are all unnamed, and a character that is named is often more important than one who is unnamed, but here that's kind of flipped, as I said. An unnamed character becomes universal and thus much larger. So this girl might not be particularized into a single identity, but if every woman can look at her and say, okay, yeah, isn't that ultimately more empowering than just seeing a single individual? These things are all open for debate. But I want to take a quick look just at the poems themselves and watch how they change as we go along. Watch all the gear shifts from setting to setting, from stage to stage. Watch the kinds of details that are getting tossed off, and try and follow the story as it is kind of cobbled together. Remember, this collection is like 3,000 poems long. We're not reading all of them. There are going to be some gaps here. Some things aren't going to quite make sense, but it's remarkably approachable, I would say. Number 1, The Hills, Lovers' Union. That tells you an awful lot right there. What she said to her girlfriend. In his country, which tells you you are somewhere else. This girl is somewhere else. Or at least she's talking about somewhere else. In his country, summer west wind blows flute music through bright beetle holes in the waving bamboos. The sweet sound of waterfalls is continuous, dense as drums, and urgent lowing voices of a herd of stags are oboes. The bees on the flowering slopes become lutes. Excited by such teeming voices and audiences, an audience of female monkeys watches in wonder. The peacock in the bamboo hill sway and strut like a dancer making an entrance on a festival stage. He had a garland on his chest, a strong bow in his grip, arrow already chosen, and he asked which way the elephant went, with an arrow buried in its side. He stood at the edge of a ripe-eared millet field, but among all the people who saw him standing there, why is it that I alone lie in bed in this harsh night, eyes streaming, arms growing lean? That's a neat little drama right there. Your basic meeting of lovers across a crowded town square, it sounds like, a village square, whatever this is. Big heroic guy walks in. Everybody in town notices him. Girl sitting there. Oh, look at that. Wow. It's the basic drama. But look how it's articulated, too. We spoke about In His Country briefly. But look at that stanza following it. Summer west wind blows flute music through bright beetle holes in the waving bamboos. The sweet sound of waterfalls is continuous, dense as drums. The urgent lowing voices of a herd of stags are oboes. The bees on the flowering slopes become lutes. Now, translations are translations. I don't know if they had oboes in this part of the world in the 3rd century BC. I tend to think not. So we're going to take that as awfully expressive, poetic license there. But we're told flute music, drums, oboes, and lutes. That's just what jumps out at me right away. Dinging all of these little musical instruments. None of them are really there. Everything is a simile. It is like an oboe, like a lute, like a drum. It is nature itself that is being described with the symphony of sounds that a forest or a jungle can have. But it's being expressed through this musical idiom. And the sound itself of the translation you can sort of get swept away in. Summer west wind blows flute music through bright beetle holes in the waving bamboos. Notice those B's, that alliteration, just making it playful and almost bubbly. The sweet sound of waterfalls is continuous, very sibilant S's in that. Dense as drums. The urgent lowing voices of a herd of stags are oboes. That urgent drops the register just a little bit, almost like the sound of an oboe. A little bit reedier, a little bit earthier. It is seductive. It is drawing you in with its music, literally, but it's a music that is not music as we know it. It is music of nature. Ding, ding, ding. So we know this is in his country. This is in the boy's country, the man's country. I'm thinking probably more young man here, where nature has an art of its own. It is not necessarily cultivated, not sophisticated, but it has an irrepressible beauty on its own. So you can see how a certain worldview is already taking shape. Excited by such teeming voices, an audience of female monkeys watches in wonder the peacock in the bamboo hill sway and strut like a dancer, making an entrance on a festival stage. What does that mean? We are just getting danced around by all of this lush sounds of the forest and the music of nature. And then, what? Monkeys? Huh? Why that? Where did that come from? It's an audience to the symphony, sure. It is a very different perspective. Here, these lines are shorter, choppier, I would say, a little bit more coarse or noisy. But that audience of female monkeys. Now, I don't know much about monkeys personally. Clusters of females hang out together. I wouldn't be surprised. But it seems like an odd detail to drop in there. That's only the women monkeys, that is. So something's going on there. The audience watches in wonder the peacock in the bamboo hill sway and strut like a dancer. Another simile to sophisticated art. Making an entrance on a festival stage. So you're getting this dynamic of the female monkeys, a peacock, which is, you know, if it was a peahen, that would be something different. But a peacock, we know what is perhaps being symbolized there. So out of this very natural, very lush setting, you get a kind of a boisterous drama of a bunch of monkeys going, oh, look at the peacock. He's purty. And look at him strut, as guys will tend to do. He had a garland on his chest, a strong bow on his grip, arrow already chosen, and he asked which way the elephant went with an arrow buried in its side. I love that. The arrow buried in its side. Excuse me, have you seen an elephant go by here? If you've seen an elephant go by, chances are you'd remember, so it seems like a disingenuous question, but still, you ask it. And can you imagine all of these girls? And again, we're talking young. He's so pretty. And boy, what a stud. From that, we learn it's a dramatic entrance because he's following an elephant. So he is automatically impressive. He's a good hunter because, you know, he got an arrow in the elephant. I don't know anything about elephants either, especially shooting them with a bow and arrow. I'm guessing it's not easy. So this guy, he's got that provider thing going for him. Again, I don't know anything about elephants, but if you can kill one, maybe you can eat it, and that's got to be a lot of eating laid out in front of you. He stood at the edge of a ripe-eared millet field. Another edge. Edge, edge, edge. What is that? Now, millet is a kind of grain. It's really more of a grass. The farming of millet goes back in South Asia several thousand years. So I'm guessing he is standing at the edge of a field, perhaps the division, the edge between the farm and the forest. So he is half in a domestic sphere, or at least just on the edge of the domestic sphere, and half in the wild. I think we all know people like that walking around today. Ladies, you know, the classic fixer-upper boyfriend. I know he's a little rough right now, but I can fix him. Teach him to tuck in his shirt and, you know, clean up once in a while. And one of these days, he'll get a job. But among all the people who saw him standing there, why is it that I alone lie in bed in this harsh night, eyes streaming, arms growing lean? I alone. He is, or she is, suffering from this. And this great big scene, which is essentially in like a village square, it sounds like. And this strapping young man comes charging through. Excuse me, have you seen an elephant around here? And all the girls go, oh, and she's just one of a crowd of girls, perhaps sounding an awful lot like an audience of female monkeys. Just, oh, she's just one of them. But out of that social moment, that very public moment, she is drawing a very personal response. She is lying in bed, eyes streaming, eyes growing thin. She's lovesick, which is a very common trope of poetry in all traditions, but it also takes us inside. This very public scene has become a very private drama in those lines. Forest animals walk there, and elephants roam. In the sky's high places thunder rumbles, but you come alone in the night along the paths of snakes and tigers. O man of the mountain country, that country of fruitful hills, ancient conquests and wide spaces, where the music of waterfalls mingles with bee sounds as drums with lute strings. If you wish to marry me, you can. But one thing, do not come along those narrow paths. Though if you must, please, when you leave here and reach your village in the hills, think of us living in anxiety here, and get that long horn you use to signal your hounds and hunters straying in the bamboo jungle, and blow on it a little. That's curious. This is what she said, we're told, talking to the boy. You get that dynamic of, okay, you know, you're from up in those hills and you're a little bit a wild man. If you come back this way, I'll be here. O man of the mountain country. Again, focusing on not just a person, but a distinction, a division. He is the man of the mountain country. She is the woman of the town. Her characterization of the place itself is that first stanza. Forest animals walk there and elephants roam. It is wild. In the sky's high places, high, 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 thunder rumbles. Nature is threatening a little, ominous. but you come alone in the night along the narrow paths of snakes and tigers, O man of the mountain country. It's almost like he's from he's a little down and dirty. He's a wrong side of the tracks kind of guy. She's a more proper girl of the village. And there's something dangerous about this relationship. That country of fruitful hills, ancient conquests, and wide spaces, where the music of waterfalls mingles with bee sounds and drums with lute strings. Again, that music of nature. That's where you come from. That's different. We get another call out to the lute, and I would be remiss if I didn't point out these parallel tradition of poetry that you find in some characteristics of ancient Greece, some in ancient Rome, of so-called Arcadian poetry, where it is where love stories tend to begin with shepherds out in the hills who have lots of time on their hands, and they come across innocent young maidens, and there is always a lute playing somewhere, and you can find images of this very frequently. Whenever you see like Renaissance era painting with sheep and a lute, that means that there's a shepherd somewhere, there is a young lady somewhere, and somewhere while the sheep are grazing, they are sneaking off into the bushes. This is a long way away from that geographically, but the same basic symbolism is there, which is that people who are more in touch with nature is one way of putting it. People who are perhaps a little coarse, a little wild, are somehow more authentic, somehow more noble and less corrupted than people of the town. And that's kind of going on here too, because you're getting these repeated references to, good or bad, the distinction between the wild and the domestic. Question.
Yeah, when I was reading it, after reading it, it gave me the thought about Tarzan, the movie. No, it's a wild, and like say this girl come from a different country to his country.
Yeah.
He's a wild person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he lived in nature, so you see the sound. Even on the movie, they display the sound of the, all that. So it's kind of the same.
Yeah. Well, what you're talking about is essentially the same drama with some modestly troubling overtones. Tarzan, the character, comes out of a novel, a series of novels, I believe. Ultimately, the most famous, the first being by what's his name, Edgar Rice Burroughs, a Victorian Englishman, and it is the story largely of a Victorian English expedition that gets shipwrecked or something off the coast of Africa, and a young couple is killed. A young noble couple, aristocratic couple, is killed, and their baby is then adopted by apes. I don't know, some kind of monkey. I don't know. And then raised to become this hero Tarzan. And yeah, there is a lot of conflict between the idea he is the aristocrat, he is the very white man, he is sophisticated in his own way, but he has been raised in nature. So he is better than everybody around him, but he is still sort of different among them, and he's not the same then as everybody back in England either. So there are all sorts of complications there. But that basic dynamic of the difference between the wild and the civilized is running parallel through all of that, and you can see that in a lot of the work that we've read. Think of the Odyssey, the end of the Odyssey, where Odysseus needs to go find his father, who has rejected life in the palace and is now living as essentially a pig farmer out in the middle of the wilderness. He has gone back to nature, and he has shed his life of sophistication and culture out of mourning for his son. But the story is only complete when the son returns home and effectively brings the father back into the fold, recovering him from nature. So that divide is always there. The difference between something that is seen as uncivilized and rarefied. And remember again what we're writing or what we're reading here, which is the Tamil tradition is very different than the northern India tradition. The big cultural centers of South Asia tend to be in North India. So the southern parts, those are the backwaters. Those are where, you're from there? You're not one of the more refined people, one of the more sophisticated people. And you can see these themes getting played out, these attitudes coming to the surface, this consciousness of the difference between town and country. And watching that, I think, is, crucial. The seashore, anxious waiting. Near the salt pans, the clusters of natal and blue lily are closing for the day. The sea restlessly brings in the lapping tide. The side-pincered crab surfaces from the wet nest of black clay, and the seaside falls silent in the absence of users. Don't ask the charioteer to yoke the thick-legged donkey to the crooked plow, to your chariot strung with bells. And for our lovely girl's sake, her eyes cool as rain, stay tonight and go on tomorrow, man from the great waters, in that shining big sea, fishermen with big boats, careless of the killer shark, dive for the right spiraled oyster, sound loud the conch shells that contain voices, are met and welcomed by bustling Korkai city as they disembark in the long sandy coast. There you'll see our good little town. And this is the girlfriend interceding in their relationship and talking to the young man. And the tone of what she's saying is a little dismissive, I would say. A little condescending, a little disdainful. And again, you can, if you interpret this as a servant also, well, where does a servant fall on the social scale between, a young lady of the town and a roughneck from out of town? Is the servant superior to the roughneck or still a servant to all? It's a little unclear. But that notion of mismatched love is being drilled down on here. Don't ask the charioteer to yoke the thick-legged donkey used to the crooked prow to your chariot strung with bells. You, young man, are too crude for my friend, my lady. You're just wrong.
I feel that the servant is older. It's like an old person.
Perhaps. There's, you can unpeel that a couple of ways. Could be an older servant. But then just think about the different layers that you're creating with this. There is a gender dynamic. He is a male, she is a woman. There is perhaps an age dynamic. If she is older and he is a young boy and she is perhaps scolding him, we're not sure. There is, as I said, perhaps a socioeconomic dynamic going on here where we're not sure who would be, you know, the more powerful or the more outranking or whatever. There are all these little questions that are being raised in this very tight little form that there are no answers to, but that are pretty intriguing just to consider when we're seeing these characters being fleshed out in a very real drama for us. And we're saying, oh my God, all of these little oddities, let's say, all these little quirks of the story are giving me one hell of a window into what life was like at that little town. You know, just that last line of our good little town. There's a certain pride in that, a certain condescension about where he's from in comparison. The very next one, what her girlfriend said, the lover within earshot behind a fence. A neat little drama there. This scene has been played out in pretty much every TV sitcom ever created. Two characters have a conversation, someone is overhearing and maybe misinterprets it. On the new sound where fishermen, their big nets ripped apart by an angry sea, dry the great hauls of fish in a humming neighborhood of meat smells. A laurel tree blossoms all at once in bright clusters, fragrant as a festival. But this unfair town is noisy with gossip. What with an unfair mother too, keeping strict watch over us, will our love just perish here in sallow patches? This love for our man of the seashore, where petals loosened by the traffic of birds mix with the mud of backwaters, where the big-maned chariot horses galloping there are washed clean by the waves of the sea. Again, just curious going on here. Now, putting aside that this is supposedly a conversation that this servant girl or girlfriend, however you want to interpret her, is having with the primary girl, where she expects that is being overheard by the guy. So she is making all these same points, perhaps trying to elicit agreement to drive more of a wedge perhaps between these two. But just look at some of the particulars in there, some of the individual lines. On the new sound where fishermen, their big nets ripped apart by the angry sea, ripped apart. More division, more separation, and that's kind of what is being dramatized here, the separation of these lovers. And here the angry sea is really their culture, nature, and automatically then you get another blurring of what is the difference between culture and nature. Just like the music, the symphony of the forest, culture and nature, here we're seeing culture and nature conflated once again. In a humming neighborhood of meat smells. Now, I read that and I start to think, well, hey, sounds like a barbecue on the beach. That's great. But, you know, meat smells is also possibly a little stinky. Especially when you think the meat is fish. They're great hauls of fish in a humming neighborhood of meat smells, probably largely fish, and fish can be a little stinky. Either way, it's kind of an earthy sense again associated with this young man. But in that rather disgusting milieu, a laurel tree blossoms all at once in bright clusters, fragrant as a festival. Something beautiful comes out of something stinky. But this unfair town is noisy with gossip. The town is the culture. The culture is opposing this laurel tree, which is love. Anybody who's ever tried to date someone a little out of your league, you know this dynamic. People wondering, why is she with him? Good God. I still hear that from my in-laws. We're petals loosened by the traffic of birds, flower petals set free by fluttering birds. How lovely, mixed with the mud of the backwaters. I'm a mud guy. That's me. I'm mud. My wife is the petals and the loosened by the birds. I'm the mud. The dynamic is being driven home in these very evocative images. You're not telling you this is about, the pretty little princess and the boy from the wrong side of the tracks. They are dramatizing this moment and expressing it in very poetic terms. So you can you can just read the words and say, I don't get it. But if you start applying a little abstract thought, saying, well, okay, maybe they're not real petals. Maybe it's something else. Maybe the petals are the girl and the mud is the guy. Oh my God, Eureka! The wasteland, lovers' hardships. What she said, thinking of him crossing the wilderness alone. So again, separation. The round blazing sun creeps in the sky, raging as a fire in the forest, and the silk cotton tree is leafless, yet in flower without a bud, like a long array of red lamps in the month of Kartikai, lit happily by bustling women, in the fruitless forest where pools are dry, dusty. If only he'd spend some time with me, it would go fast. If only he'd walk swiftly with me on the dunes overhung with flowering boughs, all fragrant, where the forest stream flows now in the sand, is laid out like a woman's bodice. He could have what arms desire, loving embraces, body entering body, and then my guiltless eyes that now fill ceaselessly like barren pools fed by secret springs could put aside their daily sorrow and find some sleep. She's not taking separation very well. We have a stage 3 clinger here. But she feels oppressed not just by the system or the relationship or the absence of her lover, but all of nature is now turning against her as well. Symbolically, the entire universe is against her because of that blazing sun drying everything out. Creeps in the sky, raging as a fire in the forest. The silk cotton tree is leafless, this kind of dead husk of an earth. And when you think about it, when you're depressed, you're looking around and everything is just so dry and lifeless. Especially, I would say, if your perspective is of fairly lush forests. If you dream of lush, or if you live in lush forests, and that is your norm, the idea of a desert is going to have a special kind of horror for you. Just like I would say in the Hebrew Bible, when the roaming Israelites wanted to portray a place that everybody would naturally want to go to. They were nomads wandering through the desert. So what are they going to think of as the place that everybody wants? A garden. Free-flowing streams, lots of green, lots of cool. And thus you have Eden. But here, you're getting that intense heat, you're getting that dryness, you're getting that worn out depressed, almost apocalyptic landscape. And again, the tones of it are all find great development in T.S. Eliot. My guiltless eyes that now fill ceaselessly like barren pools fed by secret springs. Notably, I would say guilt. She feels no guilt in this relationship, even though maybe they're keeping it a little bit quiet from everybody else, as, you know, mismatched loves tend to be. But guilt is a social and cultural thing. It's not necessarily natural to an individual. It's not something inside. It is a pressure outside or from outside that can be internalized, but it doesn't necessarily spring up on its own. If no one's there to see you do something a little dicey, you don't generally feel guilty about it. You know? Jaywalk without a cop there, it's just crossing a street. But if there is some pushback from the culture, from society, that creates a different kind of pressure. And she is dwelling on that because she feels the pressure of society encapsulated in the universe as a desert, as a harsh, harsh place. And that pressure is building up on her and forcing her consideration in the poem to be even more internal. A hen eagle broods sick in the great branches lifted to the sky in the neem tree, with cracked trunk and dotted shade, where unschooled children scratch their squares on a rock flat as a touchstone and play marbles with gooseberries. In that wilderness with fierce little settlements of marauders, and bow their only plow. And as evening comes creeping in, sapping my strength, what can I do but think of her, who is sweet as a deed long wished for and done, standing there in this hour of memories, in front of the house lamp blazing. This is the perspective from the guy. He's allowed to have a perspective too. Much of this significantly has been the perspective of the two female characters, which again, I think is very significant. But here, this guy is getting his say. And it's it is more self-torturous, I would say, more separation. The hen eagle broods sick in the great branches lifted to the sky in the neem tree with a cracked trunk and a dotted shade. More desert imagery, largely. Where unschooled children scratch their squares on a rock flat as a touchstone and play marbles with gooseberries. Unschooled children. Unschooled children are natural, perhaps. It is a sign of some innocence, I would say. And you can interpret that for good or for ill. But it is also, I would say, a sort of a jab. Maybe this boy at this time, having been to the town and seen the more refined girl, is now looking around at his own place and go, you know, you people really are a bunch of yokels. You're not doing anything. Unschooled children scratch their squares on a rock flat as a touchstone and play marbles with gooseberries. It has a certain charm, but that's not really that inspiring. In that wilderness with fierce little settlements of marauders, the bow their only plow. The bow is a bow and arrow. It is a weapon. They are not farmers. They are, well, marauders, thieves. And these children are being raised in that. And it doesn't really paint a particularly flattering portrait of their little society. You can say, oh, well, it is natural, but is it good? As evening comes creeping in, sapping my strength, what can I do but think of her? He is lovesick as well. He is suffering again, just like her. In the evening, as evening comes creeping in, another sign of division, of separation, of distinction between two things. 2 times of day, 2 locales, 2 people, forever separate but proximate. Who is sweet as a deed long wished for and done, standing there in this hour of memories, in front of a house lamp blazing. In front of a house lamp. Huh. That's curious. That's very specific. What the hell could that mean? In front of a house lamp blazing. When you see someone in front of a house lamp blazing, a young girl of marriageable age in front of a house lamp blazing, what could that be? What do you see? Well, depending on, I would say, the material used to make her clothing, perhaps the color of the clothing, you know, wear something thin and all white and stand in front of a bright, bright lamp. What are you showing people? More than just the dress. That to me is a sexy little image there that this young man is dwelling on. This young man separated from his paramour is thinking of. And the poem ends on that little line, leading you to wonder, what's he about to go do? We don't need to dwell on that. But I think that element is there. But also in front of a house lamp, not just any lamp, a house lamp. Now, I don't know specifically what they're referring to there, if that's like a special kind of lamp of that culture in that time or whatever. But she is in front of, now take the word lamp out of there. What is that sentence? In front of a house. She is associated with the house, the home, domesticity writ large, proper civilization. And he's sitting there looking around in his dumpy little caravan village, probably, and dreaming of something more settled, something more refined, possibly, but something that is home. The word settlements comes back to haunt here too, because a settlement isn't necessarily a village. You get the sense that marauders probably don't stay in one place very often. And he sees this girl as an opportunity to settle, to put down some roots, to feel some permanence in life. The forest, happiness after marriage. Her arms have the beauty of a gently moving bamboo. Her large eyes are full of peace. She is far away, her place not easy to reach. My heart is frantic with haste, a plowman with a single plow, on land all wet and ready for seed. I'm not going to dwell too much on that last image. I'm just going to let, responsible young adults like yourselves draw out the many lines of interpretation. But significantly, I would point out, we are, of course, once again in his perspective, And he is focusing. Her arms have the beauty of a gently moving bamboo. He is comparing her to nature. She is far away, her place not easy to reach. I think they're married now, but still there is a sense that she is still distant to him. She is perhaps aspirational. And that characterization will continue for probably quite a while, even though they're now living in the same house. What he said to his charioteer on the way back, when guys talk. That's what we're in here. Rains in season, forests grow beautiful, black pregnant clouds bring the monsoons and stay. Between flower and blue gem flower, on the bilberry tree, the red-backed moths multiply and fallen jasmines cover the ground. It looks like a skilled man's work of art, this jasmine country. Friend, drive softly there. Put aside the whip for now. Slow down these leaping pairs of legs, these majestic horses galloping in style as if to music. Think of the stag, his twisted antlers like banana stems, after the clustering bud and one big blossom have dropped. Think of the lovely bamboo-legged doe ready in desire. If they hear the clatter of horse and chariot, how can they mate in their usual dead of night? Rains in season, forests grow beautiful. Rains. The dry is all over now. Now it is wet. Swampy. Yeah. Musty even. Black, pregnant clouds bring the monsoons. I'm sure that's a completely coincidental use of the word pregnant in describing nature and wet nature. Bring the monsoons and stay. The clouds bring the monsoons, bring the wet weather, and then they just stay. So he's giving a nice little weather report here on the one level. The clouds come and they're sticking around. This is perhaps the rainy season. But again, what else could that mean? It's not just recording the weather. He's not writing an almanac. And stay. Well, think back to the earlier point for him, which is that she represents home and a change from his wanderings. So he sees in her, in this relationship, in this wet and stormy moment, stasis, stability, rootedness. Lots of natural imagery. Fallen jasmines cover the ground. Sounds like it would be very fragrant, very lush. Friend, and remember, he is talking to his charioteer, the guy who drives his chariot with the horses. So you can read this on a very literal level. And the literal level is always the way you should read stuff, right? Drive softly here. Put aside the whip for now. Slow down. These leaping pairs of legs, those majestic horses galloping in style as if to music. Music? Civilization, art, music of the forest that we heard earlier. Here applied to nature, nature of the horses. And just the horses, right? Nothing human about this kind of passionate activity. going on. Think of the stag. His twisted antlers like banana stems and the clustering bud, and the one big blossom have dropped. Think of the lovely bamboo-legged doe, ready in desire. If they hear the clatter of horse and chariot, how can they mate in their usual dead of night? Problem. The clatter surrounding them disturbs them from their intimacy. Another sense of the outside world, perhaps. The gossiping town that we have been told about, who can hear you when you are young newlyweds. And they whisper about you behind their back and make you feel a little self-conscious, like, how can I get my game on? All the town yakety yaks are right outside, and it's not like we have really, thick walls around here. The way they lay together like deer, mother doe, and fawn with their boy between them was very sweet. Neither in this world hugged by the wide blue sea nor in the one above is such a thing easy to get. I think they found the time to be together. And this is such a sweet little moment. When you think of, again, consider the dramatic arc here of these two young people meeting, falling in love, dealing with the struggles of an early relationship, dealing with the struggles of an early marriage, and now this beautiful little picture of family intimacy. And the sweetness of that image of, dad on one side of the bed, mom on the other, and the baby right in between them. Maybe all sort of curled around one another. That intergenerational love, family. It's sweet. The young man who has dreamt of exactly this, that stability. The young woman who dreamt of being able to get this young man and drag him out of the wilderness and bring him into a stable domestic sphere. And they're enjoying it. And they're appreciating it also with that last line. Not in the one above is such a thing easy to get. They understand. Or perhaps at least the poet reflecting on this understands that this is precious. But of course, everything precious is vulnerable. In his country, what she said, the lowland, unfaithfulness. In his country, spotted crabs born in their mother's death grow up with crocodiles that devour their young. Why is he here now? And why does he take those women, a jangle of gold bangles as they make love, only to leave them? Perhaps he has returned to his country, or maybe again she is reflecting on the way things are in his country, among his people, his kind. Spotted crabs born of their mother's death grow up with crocodiles that devour their young. You can pierce that a number of different ways, but I'd say just generally, these are portraits of predatory animalism, a kind of monstrous quality. There's not much. Just think about the different animals that you can talk about in that, and why would they go with crabs and crocodiles? To me, they're the most inhuman. Monkeys, dogs, a host of other creatures in the animal kingdom seem like little people often. But you can't look at a crab or a crocodile that way. They're just different. Why does he take those women a jangle of gold bangles as they make love, only to leave them? I love that jangle of gold bangles. The rhyme is kind of bitter. And the gaudiness and disapproval expressed here, you know? Why is he going to see her? She's just a skank. A little too flashy, a little too trampy. What's she got that I don't have? But what I think is really significant is that last line. Again, last lines. That last line. Why does he take those women a jangle of gold bangles as they make love, only to leave them? It's like she doesn't value or really, well, you can make an argument that she's not even objecting to the sex itself. I sense there is a little betrayal there. But what she's keying in on is the fact that after they have sex, he leaves and goes back to her. She is the stasis. She is the stability. She is the home. And he does return to that. And she doesn't understand necessarily why he goes out to do that with those tramps when he knows, and even the tramp knows, that he's going to come back home. He won't stay. That's, I think, heartbreaking and instructive. It gives you a real sense of the complexity of this relationship, the richness of this relationship, in a way that you just don't find in too much other art of the time. This voice of a woman trying to deal with very painful experiences and articulate them in her own very particular way. What the girlfriend asked and what she replied regarding his return. From the long frond ponds of a deserted talipot tree with clusters thick and hard like an old date palm, a male bird calls to its mate, and the listening tiger roars in echo. On those difficult roads where hot winds blow, but then your lover who went there has returned, has hugged you sweetly ever since, and you've lain together inseparably in one place. And yet, why do you look like a ruin? Why do you grieve, my girl? So you ask, friend. It could look like that to someone who doesn't know. What's the use of longing faithfully for his strong chest? Now that's now like the cold beaches of Tonti City, famous in the mouths of many. When love is gone, what's copulation worth? It's just devastating. The same sense of betrayal, the same devaluation, I would say, of the physical aspects of human love. Here, the friend, again, we can parse that a number of different ways, is saying, well, he come back to you. What's the problem? He went out, he did whatever guys do, but he came back, and now you're here inseparably in one place. Stasis, unity, no divisions, theoretically. And she comes back with the opposite. So it is a divided viewpoint being expressed here. What's the use of longing faithfully for his strong chest that's now like the cold beaches of Tonti City, famous in the mouths of many? His strong chest, that particularity of the physical, broken down. And I don't know about you, but I think of that first image of this young man when you see him striding into the village, hunting for the elephant. And I just imagine this very broad-shouldered young man with a wide chest, showing it off before the gut starts to happen, as, you know, among us is common. Famous in the mouths of many. Now, you can parse that a number of different ways. What's that? Yeah, it can be kind of gross.
No, she roasted him.
Yeah, roasted him. True. But think of just that one image of famous in the mouths of many. It could be physical. And in that, you could divide that in by two and say that it is physical in the sense that it is sexual, which is what he's being accused of here. Or it could be physical in the sense that it is another call out to the predatory animalism that we talked about just a few poems ago. That sense of people are always sniping at one another, and it's that sense of the outward culture applying pressure to the inward intimacy of their relationship. But that sense of the outward and the inward, the division between them, I think lends strength to the poems as a whole. Because we are getting these very intimate portraits of humanity in opposition to the world around them, in opposition to the public world around them, in opposition to the universe around them, which they don't necessarily understand. Science was not particularly well developed in the 3rd century. You look up at the sky and you have no idea what is going on up there. So here we have these very precise little portraits of human drama pulsing within this great but hostile environment. And because of that eternal struggle, because of that painful existence, the insecurity of it, the fear of it, the frustration of it, we can relate. We know marginally more science when we look up at the universe around us, but we've all felt this in one way or another. We've all suffered with these sorts of dramas. Maybe not the exact ones. I'm sure nobody on this room has ever had a significant other sneak off somewhere on them. Or no one in this room certainly has been the one to sneak off. But this draws us in and points to, if somebody 2,000 years ago on the other side of the globe is going through exactly this, well, it's not that far in time or space at all. And that understanding is the real power of the art, to draw you in and show you that you, if you're having those same feelings, are not so alone as even this one girl seems to feel herself. And maybe you can take a little solace from that, but Maybe you can draw some lessons and say, well, if I ever see my boyfriend doing that to me, I'm going to be very different. Maybe. But art is about prompting these questions. Let me see. I want to add. Let's just take a quick look at the Purim poems. I'm not really sure how to pronounce these, so forgive me if you know. Oh no, it's Purim. I don't know. I'm winging it on that. I don't really care about pronunciation in any case. Take a look at these where we're dealing with exterior poetry in the Tamil tradition. More public, more political in many regards, more social, less about, you know, what's going on deep inside, but in its own way, just as evocative and in its own reflections on the outside, hinting at the interior of the people within them. This world lives because some men do not eat alone, not even when they get the sweet ambrosia of the gods. They've no anger in them. They fear evils other men fear, but never sleep over them. Give their lives for honor, will not touch a gift of whole worlds if tainted. There's no faintness in their hearts, and they do not strive for themselves, because such men are, this world is. Yay. Good for them. Very moralistic, very proper, very sound advice on being a good citizen type stuff. And yet, there is that interdependence. There is the distinction between the man and society here, between the individual and the group. This world, the whole universe, because some individuals do stuff. The world is dependent on these smaller groups within. There is a give and take between them, which tells you that maybe the exterior world, the universe, the society around them isn't so much of an other as it is a component. The exact relationship is being called into question. Bless you, earth, field, forest, valley, or hill. You are only as good as the young men in each place. Dependence, interdependence. Children. Even when a man has earned much of whatever he can be earned, shared it with many, even when he is master of great estates, if he does not have children who patter on their little feet, stretch tiny hands, scatter, touch, grub with mouths, and grab with fingers, smear rice and ghee all over their bodies, and overcome reason with love, all his days have come to nothing. Would make a nice, you know, Mother's Day card, Father's Day card. But it's more than that. What do you make of that little gear shift in the middle? It starts off with that very positivistic, yes, children are good, and a man without children is nothing. Very social construct. You know, be fruitful and multiply. A culture lives by its children. So the authority structure is usually encouraging you to go out there and, you know, let's get going. Children are good. And there is that tone going through that. Even in that moralistic severity, that if you don't have children, you are nothing. Okay, but that tone is distinct. But right smack dab in the middle of it, you get this little profusion of really fun images. If he does not have children, and then again, this is just typesetting, but another little separate chunk of text, who patter on their little feet, stretch tiny hands, scatter, touch, grub with mouths, and grab with fingers, smear rice and ghee all over their bodies, and overcome reason with love. And that's kids. They're messy, they're noisy, they're all over the place, and you're freaking out. But you see a nice little drama just in the structure of this poem, where on either end, it's very formal, very stern, very moral. But in the middle is the chaos of life, the chaos of children, this profusion of humanity within social structure, that beating heart within the exterior. I find that just extraordinary. Oh, heart sorrowing for this lad, once scared of a stick, lifted in mock anger when he refused a drink of milk, now not content with killing war elephants with spotted trunks. This son of the strong man who fell yesterday seems unaware of the arrow in his wound. His head of hair is plumed like a horse's. He has fallen on his shield, his beard still soft. Sacrifice in war. Societies need this. Societies demand young men to go and fight for them. And this is what is happening, and he is being honored for that. It's a necessary correlation of the personal and the public. That man's individual sacrifice, that boy's individual sacrifice, allows the society, the culture, the civilization to thrive. But within that, little hints, I think, of more going on there. When we are told, this son of the strong man who fell yesterday, well, that really starts to personalize it. Again, no names, but like, oh, he died today, his father died yesterday. Who else might be in this family holiday card that isn't being mentioned? Mom. Her sacrifice is necessary for the culture to survive. That is implied by that. The poem would work just fine if this soldier had no parents at all. But when you mention one, you gotta assume that there's another one somewhere. And I think that is an important note to strike there. And then you look at that last one, which gets even more explicit. To bring forth and rear a son is my duty. This is a mother talking, a mother's list of duties. To make him noble is the father's. To make spears for him is the blacksmith's. To show him good ways is the king's. And to bear a bright sword and do battle, to butcher enemy elephants and come back, that is the young man's duty. That's a mother being explicit about what everybody owes. Now, duty is a social construct, as we might say. It is cultural. It is something civilization presses upon you, like guilt. It is your duty. Okay. That's what it means to be a part of the whole, part of the universe, part of the culture, the civilization. Within that, you have your own feelings, perhaps, about it. Just look at those first four lines. Bring forth and rear a son is my duty. She prefaces the entire thing with her own. The female duty comes first. Almost primary, perhaps most important, who knows? To make him noble is the father's. The father has to teach him the qualities of the society. What is respected, what is expected. To make spears for him is the blacksmith. To show him good ways is the king. The blacksmith, a skilled artisan, but probably from the working class of a society, probably distinct from the king. So you go from blacksmith to king in the span of 2 lines. You're talking about the scope of society. But it takes all 4 to raise this child effectively with these duties, with the sense of these duties, with the sense of the culture, which is another way of saying it takes a village to raise a child. But once that is accomplished, the child himself takes on the responsibility of his own duty. His duty to bear a bright sword and do battle, to butcher enemy elephants and come back. That is the young man's duty. Now, do we think that in the social contract, that is certainly not written down but implied, of this society, it is told that his duty is to come back? I would say probably more explicitly, okay, yeah, you're going to go and you're going to do battle, you're going to go hunting for everybody and bring back food, but it is not explicitly your job to come back. But whose voice are we hearing this from? The mother. So maybe in the tail end of that poem, just one straggling little line right at the end, who can notice it? She is impressing upon this young man, you come back. That is your duty to me. Which is a bold claim of individualization, a bold claim of dignity for a woman of any historical epoch. Is it the implied duty of the mother to accept his loss? Is she fighting against that implied duty? Is she rejecting that duty? The poem is silent on that. But once again, we get this sense of this culture that is sometimes put in opposition to the individual. This outward pressure on an inward core. Even in this, that is supposed to be all about the exterior social, political values of the society, and this explicitly is, you can see that it is in the division between the two, the meeting between the two, that fault line between the two that we see again and again and again throughout all of these poems, Acum and Porum alike. That sense of we are all in one way or another trying to come together, but also being driven apart. We're all on opposite sides of something. But through writing about it and thinking about it, maybe we can start to bridge those divides. Maybe we can start to understand them, transcend them if possible, or at least focus on those elements where it's not the divide so much as the meeting place. And if that's the best we can do, so be it. Anybody like these poems? I like them. They're fun. They're passionate. They're deeply personal. They're surprisingly intimate. And they're very sophisticated for what is, again, supposed to be kind of a out-of-the-way place. This is a culture where these are very academic poets. They have access to books. They have a cultural heritage generally taken from other places that they have mixed and formalized with indigenous, probably largely oral cultures. But it's remarkable in its intimacy. I just think it's fun.